Karakia timata. E te atua, e tiori nei nā manu, e whiti nei te rā, e ara nei te tangata, e korikori nei te tinana, e hihi ko nei te wairua. Paua ki roto ki a mātou te whakaro nui, me tō whakaro pai. Kia mura ai te ahika o tō wairua tapu, kia rite ki te ihi o te rā. Māori ora e te karaiti, te kura hautu o tō mātou kurati waka. Āmine.
E te whānau kua tai mai nei, haere mai, nau mai, whakatau mai rā. Te mea tuatahi ki te atua ka rawa, te kai hau mai o nā mea katoa. Te mea tuarua ki a tātou katoa, ki tēne hui hui nā te kaupapa Taha Māori. No reira, piki mai, kake mai, tēnā tātou katoa.
Whakapono e hara I te mea nona ia nei te aroha no ngā tupuna I tuku iho I tuku iho te whenua, te oranga o te iwi nonga tupuna I tuku iho whakapono tumanako te aroha no ngā tupuna I tuku iho I tuku iho I tuku iho I tuku iho
He mihi kauake kia koutou. Tātou hoki e noho pai ana. Kei wainganui te māhanatanga a o tātou whānau huri noa. Me mihi hoki kia tātou e mahi ana hei tiaki ngā taonga tuku iho. Hei oranga mō ngā uri whakatupu. Me hoki mahara ki ngā tini aitua. Rātou kua haere ki te tini, ki te mano, nō reira. Haere, haere atu rā. Rātou kia rātou. Tātou kia tātou. He oi anō. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā mai anō. E te atua tō mātou kaihanga. Ka tiaho te māramatanga mo te ora, me te ora. I au kupu kōrero. Ka tīmata au mahi, ka mau te tika me te aroha. Me tia kia u tonu kia mātou, tō aroha I roto I tēnei huihuinga. Whakaki a mātou whakaro, a mātou mahi katoa, e tō wairua tapu. Amen. Ata Māori e kia koutou katoa. Good morning and welcome on. Look, the sun is shining on my face. Yay! It's wonderfully warm this morning. My usual disclaimers, of course, you know what they are, most of you. For any newcomers, anyone who's new to our Zui, Taha Māori this morning, just to let you know, I'm not a reo teacher or a translator or have the qualifications to do this. I promise you this, though, my passion and my really wanting, my heart is in wanting to encourage you to engage with not only the reo in the liturgy, but also te ao Māori, through a Māori lens, in a safe and comfortable environment. And of course, as you know, the back translations, if they do come up from time to time, and they do, they're not approved. So we ask that they be used purely as a tool for understanding the kupu, the words, and not for public use. Just want to say one thing, just an apology, really, on my error. Last week I mentioned that we use the word tuoro for sick, and Māwiwi doesn't appear in the prayer book. That's wrong. Māwiwi doesn't appear in the prayer book. It does. And in a couple of places I found it and I thought, oh, gosh, okay, yes, I should be mentioning it. So Māwiwi is the other word for sick. It's not necessarily a heading, but it is definitely in the prayer book. I use the word turoro, and that's a more commonly used word, and disregarded Māwiwi. So I do want to apologise for that error from last week. We're moving on into our vowel sounds again. Just a few words. Rangatiratanga, those short vowels. Mātou, the macron vowel. Wero, you'll hear that a little later on. Wero, challenge. Tēnei, this. Pēke, bag. Whiti. So if I was talking about the sun on my face today, kua whiti te rā, the sun has risen, it's lifted, it's up in the sky. And you often hear that saying, kua whiti te rā, the sun has risen. Ihu karaiti, I don't need to explain, Jesus Christ. One one refers to a beach or a long sort of shoreline, really. And they refer to that on 90 Mile Beach, te one ro, the long beach. Kororia, glory. Urupa, cemetery. Tūmanako, hope. So keep practicing on your vowel sounds. I bring you now, and some of you may already be familiar with this young man, Finnian, a year 11 student from Kāpiti College. He went viral a few years ago. So I bring you a very powerful message from a rangatahi perspective, or rangatahi or young person perspective. So, whakarongo mai.
The Māori language is a huge part of our heritage and is an official language of our country, along with English and sign language. Culture is priceless, and it is something that should be embraced, and something that we, as a country, should be proud of. But is that what we are doing? Unless you count pronouncing Māori words completely wrong and making no effort to try and pronounce them correctly, then no. It is very important that we all make an effort to, at the absolute least, pronounce the words of our official language correctly. Now, I have tried telling people how te reo words are supposed to be pronounced, but I am met with replies like, it's not part of my culture because my granddad was from a different country, or it's the Pākehā way of saying it, or you don't know how to pronounce that because you're white. Actually, there is no Pākehā way of saying Māori words, and if I can't speak Māori correctly because I am not Māori, does that mean Americans can't speak English properly because they are not English? It is not that hard to learn a little bit of the Māori language and find out how to pronounce the words correctly, and people can learn just by listening. Now, I'm no expert in this, and I don't claim to be, and I know I don't always get it right, but I give it a go, and I'm willing to learn, and that is what counts. We already use most of the Māori syllables in our everyday speech. The ka from Kāpiti sounds like the car we drive. The ro from Raumati sounds like rowing a boat. We don't even use rau that often in our daily speech. The only word I could think of was round, whereas we use row for rowing, rotary, roam, road, rope, the list goes on. You almost have to try to say it incorrectly. All that is required to pronounce words correctly is a little bit of effort. That little bit of effort is a crucial part of preserving the language of our Indigenous culture, something that, if it dies out, unlike English, is irreplaceable, because no other countries speak Te Reo Māori. And it is part of all New Zealanders' culture, even if you are originally from a different country. You live in this country, and therefore should be proud of your country's heritage, and you should try and preserve it. And if we lose the language, the pillar of tradition, the whole culture will be weakened, and a whole lot of history and knowledge will be lost with the language. The Māori language and culture is integral to our national identity, and our beautiful Indigenous culture is at risk of being lost forever. We don't want to end up like Australia. There used to be over 500 Aboriginal languages in Australia, but now only 70 remain, with speaking numbers dropping very quickly. The wonderful Australian Aboriginal culture is disappearing. We cannot let that happen in our country. The amount of Māori-speaking people in our country is already starting to decline. Only 4% of New Zealanders can speak fluent Māori, and 84% of those are of Māori ethnicity. The percentage of Māori who can speak the language dropped by 1% between 2001 and 2006. It may seem like a small amount, but we should take action immediately, because otherwise we will realise what is happening too late. It shows how bad this problem really is. We are falling away from our country's roots, culture and tradition. I've heard stories from right here at Kāpiti College of people with Māori names who have classmates who always incorrectly pronounce their name. Is it because it is too hard to pronounce, or simply because they just can't be bothered trying? How is this fair? We as a country pride ourselves on being a fair society, but are we really? When we can't even pronounce our Indigenous people's names right? This issue isn't even about learning Te Reo, it is basic respect, and people have a right to be respected. Only when the last word has been spoken, the last tradition has disappeared, and the Western world has taken over, only then will we realise culture is irreplaceable. Now, I would like to leave everyone watching this with a wero, a challenge. Give pronouncing Māori words correctly a go. Don't just be a sheep and stick with the crowd. Let's be Kāpiti College, not Kāpiti College. You could start off a chain that helps preserve our wonderful culture and even encourages it to grow. Thank you.
There he is, Finnian. He went viral. He was interviewed by Te Karere, Māori television, you name it. He was interviewed in 2015-16, encouraging all, including Māori, to use the language well. Coming up this month, of course, is Matariki. Some of you may already be preparing some Matariki things in your services coming up. Certainly in this next Sunday, Matariki would then be observed in this next round. And these are some of the stars and some of the lunar months that you could mention if you want to in your services. The Common Life Liturgical Commission of the General Synod are working on Matariki liturgy currently, right now, but nothing's been released yet, and unfortunately I haven't been able to share anything with you. I had hoped that maybe we would get a sneak preview and we could plagiarize it for a little bit, but no, there's nothing available yet. But rest assured, I think we should have some resources come through by next year, hopefully. Matariki, all short vowels. Kāpiti, as Finnian shared with us. Here turikoka. It's this month. Here turikoka. Oh no, the month coming up, July. E tahi, meaning many, not one. Te tahi is one, e tahi is more than one. Hiwa I te rangi. Now short vowels. Hiwa I te rangi. Waiti. Waiti. Hongongoi. Hongongoi. This month. Hongongoi. So there's a real good practice on those NGs for you, as in singing. Hongongoi. Pōhutukawa. So where there isn't an asterisk, they refer to the stars. Ururangi. Poutu terangi. Poutu terangi. So those are the maramataka. You're already familiar with that word. That's our lectionary, maramataka. So we're already using that phrase, maramataka. Matariki is the season at the moment. And as of next year, it becomes a public holiday, a Matariki day. We're moving on now to our waiata. So, you know, feel free to sing along and join in on our vowel sounds. Kia ora, whakarongo mai. Oh.
Toru wā, ahaka mana para tawa ngā wā, heke mene pere te wenge whe, I hiki mini piri ti wingi whi, o hoko mono poro tō ngā whō, a e I o u, uhuku munu puru tu ungufu. Mangere tapu wai o ne hunga aorere, o tahu papa toe toe, ihu matonga iwi tamaki makaurau, a haka mana para tawa ngā wha, e heke mene pere te wenge whe, I hiki mini piri ti wingi whi, o hoko monu poro tō ongo whō, a e I o u, uhuku munu puru tu ungufu. Mangere tapu wai o ne hunga aorere, o tahu papa toe toe, ihu matonga iwi tamaki makaurau, aka mana para tawa ngā wha, e heke mene pere te wenge whe, I hiki mini piri ti wingi whi, o hoko mono poro tō ongo whō, a e I o u, uhuku munu puru tu ungufu.
Whenever we come together as a group sometime, we must do this. We have to do this together. It's great fun. Moving on now through our pastoral liturgies and our funeral liturgies. Last week we covered tangi and tangihanga. And this week we'll move on to page 871 if you've got your prayer books in front of you. Te tikanga mo te Takahi Whare. The blessing of a house after a funeral. Now, it's very common in Māoridom. I have blessed many houses in my ministry. It's expected. So we come down from the urupa or the cemetery after the nehu, the burial, and the priest or the minister or priest normally goes with the family, the immediate whānau, and maybe a few extras come out to a kuia from the marae. We go to the house. And we spend, it's only about half an hour. We spend half an hour there and we bless, you know, the liturgy, of course. If you're familiar with blessing houses, you'll know how it rolls. If you're not, then, you know, here's a learning tool for you. But we all do it, especially in rural. I don't know if it's done so much here in Auckland or in an urban setting, but Māori do like to have it done. Not just Māori, actually. I've done Cook Island services, nehu, and they've wanted it done as well. And you go back to the house, they just feel much better about everything. They know that when they finish the hakari or when they finish their kai, down wherever we are, marae or in a hall somewhere, they know that the house is blessed and they come back feeling exhausted, of course, but relieved. So te tikanga mo te Takahi Whare. And this is outside before you even go in. I usually do it at the path that leads to the house, wherever that is. Or not, I haven't entered the house or the porch at this stage. I'm outside the house, gathered, I runga I te ingoa o te atua. Te matua te tama me te wairua tapu, āmene. Kia tau mai te rangi Māori e o te atua tō tātou matua I te rangi. Te rangi Māori e o ihu karaiti, te puna o te rangi Māori e. Te rangi Māori e o te wairua tapu, te kai whakamāori e I runga ki tēnei whare. Me te hunga e noho ana I konei. Beautiful prayer that peace, 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 and more peace be bestowed upon this house and all who live here. Kua kine e te atua te tātou o tēnei whare. Tomo mai ki roto, a tukua ki kia te aho tō marama, hei whakakahore atu I ngā mea katoa o te Pouhere, ko ihu karaiti hoki tō mātou areke. Āmene. And so now we can go in. Usually a lot of crying at this point, because it's possibly the first time they've gone back into their house since the person died. So usually, you know, prior to the tūpāpaku or the body being taken down to the marae, they're in the house, they take everything they need, and then of course they live on the marae for 3 days, but they don't return to the house. It's very rare that someone returns to the house. So this is the point where they've actually kind of going back into the house, and it's very, very emotional for the whānau. Ko ara mai a te karaiti I te mati. Ko waiho hei matāmua mō te hunga kua moe. We've gone into the house now. Nā te tangata nei hoki te mate. Wai hoki nā te tangata te āranga mai o te hunga mate. I roto hoki ia ārama ka mate katoa ngā tāngata. Wai hoki I roto ia te karaiti, ka whakaorangia katoa tia. Kia whakakororia tia te matua, te tama me te wairua tapu. Ko te ritinga ia I te tīmatanga, a tēnei anō inaia nei. A kau mau tonu iho, a ake, āmene. You know this part, you're familiar with it from our prayer book. E ho tohungia mātou, it's usually chanted, as you know. E ho tohungia mātou, the response is e te karaiti tohungia mātou. E ho tohungia mātou, e tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tai mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tāo e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi, ho mai ki a mātou aia nei he taroma mātou mō tēnei rā, murua o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga e harana ki a mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea kia whakawaia, engari whakaorangia mātou I te kino, nau hoki I te rangatiratanga, te kaha me te kororia, ake, āmene. I just want to point out to you that the Lord's Prayer is chanted usually in that way. It's held in a very monotone voice all the way. There's no flair in it, particularly e tangi or Takahi Whare. Just keep it very simple, monotone, and one pace all the way through. There's a tendency that at the end, ake, 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 and we lose that a little bit. Don't drop off on your ake, because that's forever and ever. That's what that bit is. So you need to keep it up. And then the harmony itself is just said, usually. So, ake, 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 harmony. And most Māori know that. They already know how to chant this. They'd be very surprised if there was a little bit of a tune or a lilt in the prayer. They would be quite surprised by that. So for the context of a whare or on marae, just keep it very monotone, very one sound all the way through. And I know in our Sunday services it's chanted also, but you'll hear the difference. You've heard how I've done it, and if you listen at maybe the cathedral or wherever you do it in your services, you listen to the difference in the way that you've learned it. So but for the purpose of tramping the house, if you could keep it monotone, that would be great. And of course, your water has been blessed. Oh, I haven't got that blessing here. Oh, I might have later on, sorry. Karuia, and I chant this. Karui ruia e tātou tēnei wāhi, and then I usually sprinkle my first round. I use a bowl and a leaf. I have seen some priests use H2Go bottle. Yeah, not not cool, not cool. Just a bowl. Ask the whānau for a bowl if you haven't got your own. Just use a bowl, and an eating bowl is fine. Just a little bowl. Grab a twig from outside, grab a leaf from outside, and or prepare yourself and take it into the house with you. But it's okay to sprinkle water everywhere. Karui ruia e tātou tēnei wāhi. Pause. Sprinkle. Hei horoi atu I ngā mea puke. Pause. Sprinkle. A te rewera te tangata rānei. Sprinkle over the people. Tangata, you know, about the people. I runga I te ingoa, sprinkle, o te matua, sprinkle, o te tama, o te wairua tapu. Amen. So that's your first blessing of the house. Now, some whānau will ask you, I do it automatically, but you don't have to. Some people are not comfortable. Some priests are not comfortable. I go to every room in the house. Bedrooms, I go to the bathroom, I go to the toilet, because those were the places that the dead person used, the deceased person used. And whānau love that. They feel cleansed by it. But as I go through every house, you don't have to do this in every room. My practice has been when I go into one room, I go, ka rui ruia a tātou tēnei wāhi. Just that line. We sprinkle this place. That's all you need to do. Ka rui ruia e tātou tēnei wāhi. Sprinkle, sprinkle. Next room, same thing, sprinkle, sprinkle. E te ariki, e hukaraiti. Nā tau a pōtoro tapu nei te whakahau, kia kaua e whakarite ki te hunga tūmanako kore, te pauri mo te hunga e moe ana I roto I a koe. I noi atu ana mātou ki a koe, kia āwhina tia e koe I runga I te aroha, te hunga e tangi ana mo te hunga kua mate. Muku atu ngā roimata katoa I o rātou kanohi. Tēnā koe te ora nei, te kiingi tahi nei, me te matua, me te wairua tapu, ko tahi anō atua a ke tonu atu. Āmene. So I start this prayer when I come back into the lounge. So I've done the rooms, I've come back into the lounge. People can be seated or they can remain standing. and I start this prayer. You're starting to wind down now. And I won't say this all the way through. Actually, I might say it in English. And again, they're still gathered. God, the Father of mercies and giver of all comfort, look down in pity and compassion upon your sorrowing servants. Lighten their burdens, which weigh them down in soul and body. Shelter them from the forces of evil. Let the light of your presence shine upon them and give them perfect peace. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Beautiful prayer. Beautiful. The blessing. Mā te atua o te rangi Māori e nāna nei whakahoki mai roto I te hunga mate. Tō tātou āreki a ehu tawa hēpara nui o ngā hipi. E mea tanga nā ngā toto o te kawenata mutunga kore. Māna koutou e mea kia tino tika I runga I ngā mahi pai katoa. Kia mahia anō e koutou te mea e ahureka ana ki tāna titiro. I roto anō ia ihu karaiti. Waiho atu I aia te kororia ake. Āmeni. Lovely. Almighty and ever-living God, in baptism you get, here's the blessing of the water. Here's the blessing of the water. So, yeah. And in the prayer book, it is actually at the end. So this is your blessings. Many of you will already be familiar with this. Blessing your water before you start. So I've done that before I start. I usually do it quietly. I don't make a big thing about it. I do it quietly. And then I start the karakia outside the house at the gate. And that's your Takahi te Whare. And I think there's, there's blessing of big buildings too that we do, and that would be a good template or guideline, and you modify it to the buildings that you're blessing. I just want to give us a quick, if I may move on from that liturgy, just another quick glimpse, of course, to Te Rawiri. You know, the Book of Common Prayer that I mentioned last week, which was 1905. Of course, they brought out the written version, and many Māori still use it in usually in the rural areas. I go up north and they use it quite a lot on marae. And so those links, and we'll make sure, I'm not sure if the links we sent you were correct or clickable last week. So we'll make sure that that's all updated for you. If you want to go in and have a look, they're very, very cool. Here's one of the content pages. You know, it tells us about what's in this book. Ngā mea o roto I tēnei puka puka, the things in this book. So it's your content page. The first one, mo te ata, morning, mo te ahi ahi, afternoon, mo te rā tapu, for Sundays, and so on. This is the hymnal that's available in the Te Rawiri, again, used widely throughout. What I wanted to say was that a lot of those hymns are still in the current hymnal, which is here. That's it on the right-hand side. And that's available if you're wanting it. It is available through Te Piopatanga o Aotearoa. If you emailed the PA there, she'll be able to send you a book. I think it's about $5 plus postage. But the old book is very much the same as the new one. And I just want to play this waiata, this himini that's often sung at tangi. So, whakarongo mai.
Whakarongo ake rā.
It's lovely. Beautiful waiata. I don't know if we pinched the tune from anywhere. Probably. The rangi, it says, you know, the one on the right-hand side is from the Te Rawiri itself. Rangi means the tune. Saint Bees, bows, bees, 260. So you may already be familiar with the tune. But it's a lovely himene, and it's all, most tangi, they'll sing this waiata, this himene. It's lovely to learn. And it's hymn number 89 in the old hymnal, and it's still hymn number 89 in the new one, which is lovely. Bit of continuity from 1905. Okay, moving on. Te tiriti tu te Pouhere. We started last week with Pihopa John Black from 1840 to 1992. Powerful message in his sermon at St Matthew's in the City on the 25th anniversary in 2017. So I'll trust you've all either preached last Sunday or was in a pew listening to someone preaching on Te Pouhere. Either way, we all must have been with Pouhere that day. I was blessed with being the preacher at Moku down south. Last week, we heard from Pihopa John Black and his unpacking of some less than admirable moments in our Anglican history here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And thank you for sharing your whakaaro afterwards, your thoughts afterwards. Thank you. This week, we hear from a group of friends in a slightly different gospel conversation. They explore what the Bible may be urging us towards in terms of our tikanga relationships and te Pouhere, and what this unique way of being can offer the world, in fact. So enjoy a conversation with friends. It's about 10 minutes long, so hopefully that's not too long for you. Whakarongo te tiro mai.
Welcome to you on what in the Anglican calendar is a slightly different Sunday in New Zealand, where we celebrate this structure of the Anglican Church in New Zealand and the three Tikanga structure, which is a part of our constitution. Welcome to Claire Brown and to Kelvin Wright, Bishop Kelvin, and to Jan, all coming with a vast experience of the New Zealand Church and the three Tikanga. And I really want to open the conversation up by asking about the Tikanga. Kelvin, three Tikanga, what does it mean?
Well, it's what makes our church distinctive. And I had been ordained for some time when the new constitution was started. I was in the Waikato Diocese, and remember the first synod when we met without Māori, because they were now their own part of the church, and the profound sense of loss of that. But then some years later, when we had a combined Waikato and Tikanga Māori synod, realizing why we'd done it in terms of the growth and strengthening of Māori, which wouldn't have taken place if they had continued as in effect junior brothers and sisters in the church.
So an empowering thing. Claire, we were talking quite recently about the three Tikanga and its importance. Tell me what it's meant for you and why you would think it's a good thing.
There was a lot of education happened beforehand about the history and about why it was important as a justice issue. At the beginning, it was to be two tikanga, and we had a lot of the history about how the Māori were very much junior and asking all the time for first of all a bishop, and until Hui Burko came along and really was much more powerful, things started to change. It's never been as much here in this diocese because we didn't have many Maori clergy within the diocese, but still it was important. But what didn't happen in this area was the links across.
I'm hearing some important words there, Claire, and in Kelvin, in your introductory statements, and the words I'm hearing emerge particularly are about justice, about empowering, and Claire, the word you've used, which is alongside, which I find a very strong word. Jan, what experience do you have, and what has this meant for you, the three tikanga?
The beginning of my ordained ministry was in Southland. So by the time I was ordained, the church had divided into the three tikanga, and we understood that this was so that each partner could become stronger, so that when we came back together, we had the ability to work as equal partners and to bring the strengths from each tikanga. And I guess that what I've seen is mainly that we didn't do it very well in terms of sharing the resources to allow tikanga Māori to be as strong as they might have been. You would have thought that we were poor because we gave so little to this, to the ability for Māori to strengthen in the places that they were located. So I think that what I have seen most is still a sense of, it's like I feel miserable because we've sat with so much and we haven't given a reasonable resource for our other partner to do the journey that they were set off on.
Miserable is a strong word, and I'd like to pick up on that, because the gospel, we're a people of the book, and we need to often be disciplined about anchoring some of our thoughts and decisions in the book and the biblical realm that influences us. Does it say anything about three tikanga? It does talk in general terms about justice and compassion. Three tikanga? Kelvin, again.
Well, the selection of four Gospels is interesting. There's the two that I looked at particularly were the story of the house on the rock and the house on the sand, which is in Matthew and in Luke. And it's the same story, but both Gospel writers tell it in a different way. In Matthew's Gospel, the emphasis that the writer puts on it is on the troubles that come. So the wind blows and the rain falls and the flood rises and then the house falls. So that's the emphasis, is on the trouble around him. And in Luke's Gospel, the emphasis that the writer puts on is on the digging of foundations. So he digs deep and he makes good foundations, and then the house is built and the house stands. What that says to me is that the same story which the writers had heard from Jesus is told in two different contexts. In Matthew's Gospel, he was speaking at a time of persecution, and the church was very aware of troubles. So he tells the story in that way. And Luke has a different conception. He's concerned with founding the gospel on the history of Israel and on the spiritual experience of the first Christians. And that speaks to me about the need to tell the gospel story in a way that's appropriate for the particular context that we're telling it in. And here we've got a country which is founded on treaties, bicultural to its very core, and a church which is founded in this bicultural country, but also incorporates Pacifica. So we have got to tell the gospel story in this particular context and tell it in our own particular way.
Without blocking out our partners and without ignoring their history and their interpretations.
Yes, but acknowledging the reality of the circumstance that we've got here. And the reality is that we are a partnership. We are a bicultural partnership in this country. And our church is a bicultural partnership in another partnership. That's the partnership with Pacifica. So that's the context, and all of those parts of our context have got to be acknowledged and rejoiced in. and celebrated.
Jan, drawing out of the gospel reading that you've been reflecting on, does it speak to you in any way about how we might build on our three tikanga relationship?
Yeah, I think that Matthew's gospel in particular was one I stayed with most. And I hear a call to live into the values of Christ, into the love that's reflected there in the Gospels. And it's that walking the talk. It's putting your money where your mouth is. It's giving flesh to ideas. And I copied off. I mean, I generally sit a number of translations beside one another. And Eugene Peterson says in the Message, you know, these words I speak to you are not incidental additions to your life or homeowner improvements to improve your standard of living. They're foundational words. So there's no squirming out of this. This is a call to a Christ-centered life, and a life that then mirrors, you know, the values that Christ calls us into. So that's what I think we should be doing as we live in partnership with those who are also called to, you know, hitch their waka to the post, which is Christ. Does that make sense to you? Absolutely.
And how does that resonate for you, Claire? You're drawing on a different passage again.
There are two bits of the John Gospel that seem to me relevant, and one is the love one another as I have loved you. So it's loving as Jesus does, and giving our lives as he did and does. And but the other part is, you are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer. These are our close friends, and we are all together, whether it's Maori or Pākehā or Pacifica, all called to follow the new commandment, to love as Jesus does, and to be alongside each other as we keep on learning more and about that kind of love, and doing justice together.
All three of you, I'm hearing that we've got in Tikanga Pākehā a lot of learning yet to do about the justice that you're speaking of.
For me, I think Claire's touched on the two John passages are both concerned with love, that the mark of the church has got to be love. I mean, I like Scott Peck's definition, which is the will to extend oneself for the spiritual growth of another. So when we are in partnership, when we are in loving partnership with our tikanga partners, what Jesus calls us to, I think, is not the preservation of our own interests and our own worldview, but extending ourselves for the growth of our tikanga partners. And I'm not sure we've always done that in the church. I mean, you think about it, the Treaty of Waitangi was an extraordinarily progressive document for the 1840s, and that generosity is what we're called to as Christians as well, to recognize the good of another and to extend ourselves to further it.
Yeah, it's a new time ahead, and we're getting closer to a time of tēnā rangatiratanga, at least to some extent. And the world didn't fall over, and the church didn't fall over when we started on this journey.
Thank you, Claire. So there we are, three tikanga, paddling the waka together, looking into the future together, and learning a lot about justice and cooperation.
There you are. A conversation with the Dunedin Diocese that was done this year and uploaded into YouTube. We'll send you the link for that if you want to have a look at some of the conversations, not just this one, there are several conversations that the Dunedin Diocese has engaged in. But of course, you know, again, we're talking about Te Pouhere, is it working? So it's raised some questions, this presentation. Taha Māori, walking alongside Māori, Taha Pākehā, walking alongside Pākehā and walking together, journeying together on Te Pouhere. And so it raised some questions, this kōrero, about, you know, are we together or apart? And I did preach this on Sunday, or are we apart but together? I think those are two fairly valid questions on Te Pouhere and where we're at in this 29th year. And if we were to take up the challenge or to consider what Jan tabled in Dunedin about, is it time now for us to relook and review the Pouhere and the relationship? Because a lot of people miss that one church where we were all one. There are many who miss that. That's not new. It's not just the Dunedin Diocese, because now we're kind of all off, you know, Māori churches, Pākehā churches, Polynesian churches. And we come together on big occasions, yes, but there was a time every Sunday we came together. So what might a remodeled Pouhere look like? So rather than us going off into groups, I sort of noticed that there was, you know, our groups are too small. So there's 16 of us here today. You have a choice. We can break off into a couple of groups, or we can stay in this plenary that we're in now, and we can have a very open discussion. Everyone can speak. And you just need to indicate to me. So I think if we were to break into two groups, we could possibly just make it two groups with a larger amount of people in it. And I will appoint a leader in each group, perhaps. Or please, you could appoint one leader if we do go into two groups. I think two groups is big enough for a cross-section of thoughts and whakaaro on those two questions, together or apart. What might a next model look like? Or we can stay in this room. So if you want to stay in this room, there's a couple of ways which you can indicate that to me. Down the bottom of your menu, you've got reactions. And you can do the thumbs up. Yeah, so, or hands up. Stay in this room. Yes, we've got 3, 4 so far. It's me or Joan. Joan is probably the only one missing from there. Yeah, I think it seems to be a consensus, perhaps, that we stay in the one room. So please unmute yourself. And I invite any whakaaro on what we've seen in that conversation. I'm aware that some of the feedback that we got last week did cover what they were talking about resource sharing, things like that. I'm aware that, you know, some of that did come up last week. But I invite anyone to comment on these further two questions that I offer you, together or apart. How do you see this three tikanga, this model that we 29 years down the track that we're practicing today? Are we together but apart? Are we apart but together? What is that? And the second part of the questions, what, if at all, might the next model look like for 30 years? What can we suggest for 30 years and possibly General Synod in 2022? So, who would like to start first? Just raise your hand and then I'll call your name out if you'd like to have a bit of a chat first. Just raise it visibly so that I can invite you. Thank you, Gillian.
Hi.
The problem.
Oh, sorry, Gillian.
problem-
Oh, sorry, Julian. Sorry, I said Gillian. Sorry, Julian, I'll come back to you.
And therein lies the problem, actual pronunciation.
Out of her mind. Sorry, Julian. We'll give it to Gillian, and I'll come back to you, Julian.
And we'll all practice how to say our two names correctly.
Yes, as Finnian told us to.
I think there is a larger issue than just wanting to either be together or apart, is that geographically and physically, a lot of us are not in a place where it's at all easy to even spend time together. Where I am in Tikanga, the Maori people who are there are not part of the Anglican Church. And for us to even do anything alongside one another, it's extremely difficult. And I think that's probably the case for a couple of other parts of the Coromandel as well, is that there is no parallel alongside group of Maori worshipping our way that we could actually spend time with. That's my bit. From Gillian.
Fair enough. Thank you, Gillian. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's interesting. Julian?
I was just carrying on from what Gillian said, going to say that I think it's contextual, to where you are in the country, to the church you're going to, as to how much you are not just celebrating, but living out the three Tikanga church. But I also think that a commitment to engage in things like this very course, and engaging and taking opportunities to engage with things that might bring you oneself personally into exposure and engagement and co-prayer and co-worship with Pacifica and Maori, that actual active engagement becomes an integrative force. And so one needs to, I believe for myself, I need to step into things. And then if we all step into things individually, we can do it as a church collectively. But at some point in time, whether I'm here or there, or in this place in the country or that place, I have to start with myself. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you. Prince, you had your hand up.
Yes, Cynthia, I was wondering, well, we just observed Te Pouhere Sunday, last Sunday in our church. But besides the General Synod, where else do we connect as the three Tikangas of our church? So I haven't seen anything practical or anything happening. I'm more a practical person, believing in doing things rather than writing and talking. So I wonder whether we could celebrate Te Pouhere at least once a year by coming together. Now, it's possible in a place like Auckland, where the three Tikangas are coexisting alongside. So a common service where all can come together and bring their different cultural aspects into that service as part of the celebration. Just one thought on that one.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Prince.
Otherwise, we are confined to the paper about our three Tikanga policies, but nothing happening in practice.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Good point. Kay, you had your hand up.
Oh, I did. Yes, I'm not muted, am I? No.
No.
I just wanted to reflect on something that I was talking about on Sunday, but also I found the discussion that we've just heard very powerful. And the theme that I went with on Sunday was the theme of rupture and repair. And the question that I was asking myself, listening to the discussion, was, are we, this is mixing my metaphors, but are we papering over the cracks of repair in some way? And I was thinking about what someone said about Scott Peck, saying that the willingness to extend oneself for the spiritual growth of another. And I had this image of the ropes and the waka, you know, that the bindings need to be almost elastic in order for further rupture not to happen. But we had an exercise where we were weaving, well, actually it was braiding, but you know, we called it weaving the ribbons, the 3 threads. And yet what I felt was we haven't dealt effectively with the rupture. And I was very struck by that story of Ratana that John Black talked about. And I thought, my goodness, if we can do that to our prophets so recently, relatively, then I think there needs to be a time of lament about the extent of the rupture before we even begin to repair. But that, it feels like quite an emotional response in some senses, and maybe not very helpful, but that's where I'm sitting. I'm sitting with the lament of it all, because I think, responding what Prince said as a very practical person, I'm not sure that we're in any way ready to repair until we've really acknowledged the wound that, in terms of colonization, we have inflicted.
Yeah. Thank you, Kay. Yeah, it's a, but I guess, you know, even in small groups like we have today, it is about talking about it. And I do take into account, you know, Prince's comment about, you know, action rather than sitting around and talking and reading, perhaps. And it's tricky, but the conversations do need to be had, as the Diocese of Dunedin has done and are doing in various. But I think as a hahi, mihinari, I think those conversations are being had. What we haven't done is had the conversations together, if I could put that. And I think Prince is quite right. Not only just with Te Pouhere Sunday, but we actually need to have a platform where all the voices are at the table saying, are we together or are we apart? See, we haven't had that conversation. Not since I've been a minister, and I've been a minister for getting on close to 20 years now, and we've never had that conversation. We've had it in Tikanga Māori ourselves. Maybe Tikanga Pākehā have had that conversation, maybe Polynesia, but we've never been in the room together to have that conversation. Yeah. Now, did someone else have their hand? Did someone else have their hand up? Chris.
I didn't have my hand up, but anyway. What I'd like to do is to see us put energy into grassroots things. For example, twinning with a Tikanga Māori church, rather than putting energy into trying to do something new with the Constitution. I think the Te Pouhere itself is fantastic. And we shouldn't be putting energy in at those sort of higher echelon levels of the church. It's finding the ways of making the links that help change us. Now, one of the things that's helped change me is putting energy into trying to learn more Te Reo Māori. And that is something which many Māori are also interested in, because, you know, there's been generations who have not learned it. And maybe that is a kind of joint project that a couple of churches could actually get into together. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud. Yeah. Another thing is the Anglican tendency to go for a service, you know, some church-based worship service as a kind of default way of how we might progress something. Whereas I think we should not put our energy that way. I think we need to be much more practical, because it's quite a big deal to have these kind of joint services set up as a special thing. And I guess most priests would not have the energy to organise that more than, you know, once or twice a year, and I don't think that's enough. So let's go for something different, something really practical.
Yeah, love that. Love that. And of course, the model of our Pouhere, of course, is it has 3 leaders and 3 tikanga. So we have 3 archbishops, which still does the head in on the global scale. I must say they don't get the 3 archbishops in one province even today, and you know, I do welcome any conversation we can have with our tikanga partners about whether that is something, you know, again, are we together or are we apart? We break into caucus, we go into that, and then we come back into the plenary and we say, well, Tikanga Māori have decided this, and so on. And we do that once every 2 years at Synod. So, yeah. Leslie.
If you have a partnership, you have to accept that there will be different ways of that partnership working. The fact that our constitution highlights it is the showcase that we're looking to actually do something. Now, the difficulty with that is, how do we do it?
Yeah.
How do we actually implement it at the grassroots? That's the difficulty with it. You don't change the intent, you put more emphasis on how the intent is actually implemented.
Yes.
That's not something that's going to happen in 5 minutes. We've seen
not even
in early days of the church or the missionaries coming to New Zealand, where we had, what you put a better word, a Maori church, and how that then changed over the time. Now the reversal is taking place, but it's going to take time.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
But it is happening. And it's the seeds that are planted now that are the important thing.
Yeah.
The outcome, that's in the hand of God. But the very fact that we're talking about it means there's progress.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Thank you, Leslie, for those wise insights. You're absolutely right. No one will disagree with you. No, it's not going to happen overnight. But and there is a but. We're 29 years down the track. We've got 30 years coming up. And I have preached this from the pulpit. Can we expect the same thing for the next 30 years? Or how do we grow each other? The fact that you've come into Taha Māori for a start is a tangible action on your part to come in, to look at Taha Māori, to look at the liturgies, to look at ways in which Māori do things and think about things. And it's only a snippet, I know that. It's only a tiny wee snippet. But that is one of those steps on this journey of, you know, how can we be Pouhere? How can we be one po, rather than 3 pos, I guess, on this moana that we travel and journey. And we have to ask this. We've got so much potential for something, but if we don't talk about it, nothing will change, I guess. Not saying it has to change, but I think we should ask everybody, are we happy with this? Are we happy with the way our po is? Do we accept that there's nothing more to improve? Or what next? What is that next step to reconciliation? What is that next step to the conversations that could be had? Don't have to be had, but could be had. Tough. good for us. It's good for us to talk about it. It is. It's good for us. And I think in time, I'd like for us to, come together more often and talk about it. Not necessarily on Taha Māori, but create a platform where, as Chris suggested, twin up with your Māori pastorate somewhere close to you. Do it more often. That has happened more in the last 10 years than it did before. I know I was the vicar up in Whangarei. We made very, very conscious efforts to do so. Some very bold things were done by the Pākehā vicar. And there was a lot of resistance, but we did do it. So that twinning that you talk about, Chris, and of course the other dynamic we have is seasonal. Your vicar's not there all the time, so you've got another vicar comes in that's got a whole different outlook on the work that could possibly be done. But I do want to say St John's College is calling for papers. You may have seen that come through your emails from the diocese. They're calling for papers. They're doing a second symposium. It's in John's College. They did their first one in 2017 and wrote the book. And out of it came Te Awa Rerenga Maha, Braided River, which is compelling reading about exactly what we're talking about. So they're running a second one, and Te Kotahitanga also coming together and looking at, some of the new initiatives that came through and whether some of those initiatives included a more intentional, let's say, 3 tikanga focus on some of those new initiatives. So yeah, we're talking about it. Did anyone else want to make a further comment? Well, thank you so much for your participation in that conversation. I'll just open up, share the screen again. Hopefully it'll work. No, of course it's not going to work. When you want them to work? No. Just a sec. But interesting conversation. Thank you. And I hope to bring more, perspectives to the table in the next couple of weeks that we're together. Pouhi hiri paura rama pau o te whakaro, pau o te tangata, pau o te aroha, te pau e here nei I a tātou. Mauri ora ki a tātou, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. E te atua o te moana nui a kiwa. Me enei motu o te iwi Māori, te iwi Pākehā. Me rātou katoa e noho nei I tēnei wāhi. Ka whakamoemiti, ka whakawhetai ki a koe mō tēnei whenua o mātou. Mō ngā mea pai katoa, kua whiwhitahi nei mātou. Whakanuia tō mātou aroha, tētahi ki tētahi. Whakakahangia tō mātou whai I te tika, kia kotahi ai mātou I runga I te whakaro kotahi. Kua hanga mātou e koe, hei toto kotahi. I raro I tēnei whakaro kotahi. Āmine. Gillian, I think this is you.
Yes, going after you is a bit of a tough call. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te atawhai o tō tātu ariki, o ihu karaiti, me te aroa ho te atua. Me te whiwhinga tahitanga i te wairua tapu. Ake, ake, ake. Amine.
Amine. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Of course, we've come to the end. I've run over my time as per normal. Taha Māori at Auckland, Anglican.org.nz. Anytime, drop us a line. Next week, we'll look at Hura Kohatu, unveilings, and more pastoral liturgies, of course. We'll hear from the other end of the age group. So we had the rangatahi today. We'll hear from the other end of the age group on Te Reo Māori. Always looking for volunteers for the various Karakia, of course, and mihi. And it's been a pleasure once more to be with you all. Thank you for joining us. And I hope you've got something out of it. I can hear in your voluntary participation, I can hear the improvement. The vowel sounds are just getting better and better and better. Amen. Thank you so much for trying. Finnian would be very proud of you. I mean, that was, did anybody know Finnian before I showed him today? He went viral. Just like that young girl on climate change. You remember she did that last year? And she went viral around the world. Same with Finnian and poking at us all to pronounce our Māori words properly. So next week it'll be at the other end of the age group. We'll be talking about Te Reo Māori. So noho oro mai kia koutou katoa, kia tauterangi Māori e. Peace be with you. And of course, as per usual, feel free to stay on. I've just got to remember to stop the record. I don't know how I do that. There.